If you've got a new or different idea, step up and do it. Like, have the courage to ask for support and do find some people you trust to have a sounding board, a bit of a sense check. And that was like at the start for me. I was in a small room with just a few people and went, I've got this idea. Is it crazy? And if they went yes, I was like, okay, I think I'm doing this.
Hello and welcome to episode 203 of the Quiet and Strong podcast, especially for introverts. I'm your host, David Hall, and the creator of quietandstrong.com. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to understanding the strengths and needs of introverts, along with strategies for success. Introversion is not something to fix, but to be embraced. Normally, we'll air each episode on a Monday. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform. Leave a review or a rating. That would mean a lot to me and help others find the show. Tell a friend about the podcast and help get the word out there that introversion is a beautiful thing. Susanna Reay is an award-winning business clarity coach, author of the Introvert Way Roadmap, and speaker who's been supporting expert business owners to magnify their impact globally with scalable service offers for over 20 years.
All right. Well, welcome to the Quiet, or I should say, welcome back to the Quiet and Strong podcast, Susanna. It's so great to have you back.
It's great to be back. As you said, it's been quite a few episodes since the last one, so you've been very busy in the meantime.
Yeah. So you were on episode 105. So I encourage people to go back and listen to that episode. But we're going to talk about something that you recently did. So we'll get into that. So
Yeah, totally.
so just as a summary, you're a fellow introvert. Just tell us, and again, people can go back and listen for more details on this, but tell us, what does being an introvert mean to you and your strengths and your needs?
Being an introvert to me is really about how I manage and harness my energies over anything else. So it also does link to some personality traits that I do believe, at least for myself as an introvert, great listening comes in there. A lot of independent and self-motivation I see with a lot of introverts as well. Like we've got that internal locus of motivation to make us do something. We don't need the external accountability quite so much. Being reflective, which is why I think most introverts know they're reflective. They seem to have gone into all those personality tests and gone, yeah, why am I like this? Whereas my more extroverted friends go, oh, I've never heard that term. And I'm like, I think reflectiveness is one of those things that introverts tend to do. But I think that really helps in business as well, because by being reflective, you can look back on what's worked and what hasn't and what hasn't. But also it leads to a certain curiosity and being observant as well as to how other people are operating, how people are responding, because you want to kind of sit back a little and see what's going on and then make the move and jump in. So for me, that's sort of the whole energy piece around introversion is linked to those things. So it's honoring the pause quite often as well.
Yeah,
I love my
yeah.
sleep, adore sleep.
And we as introverts, we're not all the same, but I think that what you described, being reflective and being observant, I think we all share those gifts. And they're gifts. They're like we're deep thinking. We have a lot of gifts that come from it, but we also need to check out our energy and get the sleep and other recharge that we need.
Yeah, to me, I've always, with all my clients, I say it's the power of the pause. Like if they're struggling with something, it's step away. So one of my energy builders in the day, if I find I'm hitting a brick wall, I will literally down tools, go out in nature, just go for a walk. And that will be, sorry, David, no podcast, nothing. I need to be left with my own thoughts to unwind from that. And I know that's for me to gather my energy. Whereas if I then go into a consumption mode, that's still draining my energy. So I find it quite hilarious because I don't own a dog or anything, but I'm normally in the dog walkers field. It's part of the route. And people say, "Where's your dog?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just taking myself for a walk," because it helps you think. Well, it helps me think anyway.
Yeah, yeah. We got to figure out what those things are for each of us. So last time we talked about your book, The Introvert Way Roadmap. So, people can go back and listen to more details, but summarize what that book is all about.
So the Introvert Way Roadmap is basically a step-by-step overview of looking at what are those key 4 phases, which I call startup, growth, momentum, and authority, that you go through in your service business and where to focus at each level. Because in my experience, having worked over 20 years with entrepreneurs trying to scale online, is sometimes there's big leaps into the future before they've put the foundations in place. So the book just covers in sequences, like where you need to establish yourself. And you can go through those phases quite quickly if you do them in the sequence. But I find if people leap forward to try and do the momentum piece and they haven't done the startup piece, then things can come tumbling down. So it just lays things out quite clearly. It's a full color book with lots of frameworks, drawings, diagrams, because I'm very visual in nature as well. So it's an easy, fast read. I think most people would read it in under an hour.
Yeah, yeah. And I found it very helpful myself. So,
Thank you.
and so the latest thing, you recently held the Super Fast Authority Think Tank Summit. And I was able to attend some of these sessions. We're in different time zones, so I couldn't do the 2 a.m. sessions, but I really enjoyed it. So tell us more about that and where'd you get the idea to do it?
The idea for creating it, like the initial vision was a think tank summit in terms of bringing deep thinkers, brilliant brains together, because my network is very international. So yes, I'm British, I'm in Britain at the moment, but I have contacts all around the world. And I'd been hearing over the last year or so, there's been a lot of noise about online stuff is dead. Everything's going back to in person. Events are where it's at. You've got to get out. And obviously, the introvert in me went, nah, that's not true. Online can still totally work, but it's got to be set up differently. Say goodbye to the boring summits of old, which are just about consumption, consumption, consumption. Like you listen to a talk, that's it. And then you listen to another one, and it's like smushing so much information. And I'm like, 2024 is the year of content overload with AI just producing content. And for me, it was like, I want to bring back connection. I want to bring back collaboration. And that was the premise of the whole event to begin with, of how can I bring people together? And then it's synced up with, well, what is that topic? What will people be interested in to help them? Because I was reaching out to expert business owners, those in the business of transformation. So coaches, consultants, designers, creators, therapists, facilitators, teachers, everyone in that space. Is to gain momentum in your business, you need to grow your authority. And the faster you can do that, the bigger the impact, the greater your business is. So that's how I pulled the two concepts together. And that vision sort of came to me. It was back in June time, and the Think Tank Summit was live at the start of November. So there was quite a lot of prep time between A and B, the start and the production.
Okay. Talk to us about authority. What do you mean in this context?
So authority in this context is that magic combination of credibility, visibility, your expertise, and social proof. So it's how do you gather these elements? So people say, I like him. I like David. He's got authority. He's been running his podcast because he's got all this social proof behind him. He's been doing it long enough. And this is the experience, the expertise. So you're not a flash in the pan. So how can you grow and show that? So your clients and prospects have that trust and faith in you to do what you're promising to do.
Yeah. So how did you set up the summit to do this, the super fast authority? What was the structure of it?
So there was a couple of key differences that I created. The first was I wanted each session to start with a succinct, ideally 15 minutes. In the end, they varied between 12 and 20 minutes because speakers, sometimes it's hard to get them to be succinct. But the idea was 15 minutes, share one big idea. I didn't want information overload. I wanted one concept, one idea that they're known for, and they would discuss that. And then at the end of that 15 minutes, they would ask a question to those who were gathered live in the room. And then what we would do is we would brainstorm that question together, come up with the ideas around that question for everyone who was live. And then we'd also think about how can we move that idea into action. And this was a critical piece for me because I find everyone has loads and loads and loads and loads of ideas, but it's moving it into action. And by talking it through with people and then saying, this is what I can do, that makes it sort of unique. So it was very much about connection, collaboration, who can help each other. And there was a little introvert piece that I put in that at the end of the talks, so it was 15-minute talk, question was posed, and then the whole room was silent for a couple of minutes. Because as an introvert, I was like, I want to digest what I just heard before I talk about it. So all the extroverts were like, yay, we want to go into the breakout rooms. I want to start talking. And I was like, let's just honor the introverts, have this moment to pause, to write down your own notes, finish it off. What does it mean to you before we start getting swayed by what others are saying? And I had some really great feedback from that little element of people going, I've never had that done before. I love that. So I knew I had my people in the room with me.
Yeah, yeah, that's so great. And a couple things on that. So even whether it be an online event or an in-person event, likely half of your people that are joining are introverts. And we can make online and in-person events more introvert friendly. It's gonna you have to cater to introverts and extroverts, but you can take those little elements, give the introverts some time to think. That can really, give great results to the individual and also the setting.
And what was really interesting is some of the people who were part of it, and I knew, and they outwardly say, no, I'm more extroverted in nature, did say, I like that. I did
Yeah,
actually like it.
yeah.
And, and this is where I think whenever we create events, for me as well, I absolutely wanted to have full diversity of my speakers, of the participants, and allow for everyone to just feel at home and at ease. And one of the things that cropped up during the week is I also had some women attend who, because of their religion, didn't want to go into breakout rooms with men because it's against their religion. And they felt they could ask. So as we were facilitating that behind the scenes, they requested that. We made it happen. And they felt they could join in the right way. So there's a lot of background facilitation that I think a lot of people aren't aware of when they're thinking of running an event. But actually, having that full diversity meant I did have a fully diverse attendee base as well coming into the think tank, which is what I wanted because different cultures, different countries, different attitudes, different opinions. For me, that's what makes a really good conversation.
Yeah. And then the other piece, I've been to many online summits and attended many sessions, and some of them are really good. But when you just attend 10 or 12 sessions and you're not speaking about it to anyone, you really aren't going to take away the content from all those sessions. You might think of something that you implement, but it's not as powerful as after talking briefly about something, your one idea where you discuss it and articulate it and people share their ideas. That's powerful.
Yeah, there's something, and I'm sure there's educational research in this space that if you lean and listen and then discuss and then also write down, because that's the other element I don't believe I've mentioned yet, But I use Miro, which is an interactive whiteboard software. So, what we were also doing as people were sharing in the chat in Zoom is my facilitator was transferring comments onto this big whiteboard. So, as people were talking, they were also seeing on screen those words come up visually, and then people could go back asynchronously as well outside of the live sessions, go in, and we had a chatty cafe space where people could put their introductions, put what they would recommend, and there was a networking space, but it was done in that very sort of soft space. I purposely kept it out of Facebook as well. I don't know if you recognize or realize that, but I was like, there's no Facebook happening here, because I wanted it to be about the live, the connections, easy, open access for everyone. And on the Miro board, you could be completely anonymous if you so wished. You could put your details if you wished. It really was about, if you've got something to say, I want to hear it, basically.
Yeah. And I think most of us are pretty visual people. So to share visually, it's powerful, but also, the introverts could share their thoughts in writing, and whether they want to, if they wanted to. And, often that's how we really understand our own thoughts, is by writing them out and then sharing them like that on the board. It was effective.
And one of the things that I got very used to during the room as well is I'm quite an empath in nature. I'm very good at reading faces. So I was encouraging people to stay on camera. And at various points, depending how the session conversation was going or what people shared, I got a sense of who to also call up onto the stage, because this was always a big premise around it. Is it the speakers were more conversation kickstarters? They weren't the stars of the show. I knew I needed a few names to get people to say, "Oh, I'll go along and see what they've got to say." But I actually wanted the attendees to share their voice, because at every in-person conference I've gone to, it's often that gold is in the conversations in the corridors, talking to fellow attendees, like what did they take away from the session? What is coming up for them? And so in the Zoom room as well, we'd have a breakout room, we'd come back, I'd ask people to share. And if someone put something really, very full of wisdom, and it might have just been in chat, but if I could read their face, and I'd be like, do you want to step up and just share a bit more around that? And everyone went, yes, at that point, because it's about that invitation. And again, I find introverts need to be invited, whereas extroverts will raise their hand and go, I've got something to share. But often when you invite to the stage the introvert, you get deeper wisdom coming through, because they've just thought that bit more deeply about the topic on hand.
Yeah, and you might give that, you're giving them a little bit of notice, and they might still be waiting. Like, I'm still thinking about this thought, but calling on them, they're going to share, and often we share our best pieces of wisdom, because, introverts tend to, or extroverts, sorry, tend to think out loud, whereas we're processing and we're sharing what we think is most important. So when you're calling on them, you are getting what they think is most important.
Absolutely. And it was one of the things I loved. And again, when I was reading through the feedback afterwards, because I did do a survey, every session had an exit survey as well, is people really appreciated the nurturing and collaborative atmosphere that it harnessed. And I think for me, that was one of my biggest takeaways, because that was part of my goal. That is part of my nature. I like to cheerlead everyone. I'm not like, no, let's just shine a spotlight on you, one person. I'm like, no, I think
Yeah.
everyone's got something worthy of sharing.
There's something else that you said that made me think of something that I hadn't thought of. So, I like to go to an in-person conference, and sometimes maybe you're in the big room and you're around a round table of 8 people and you're sharing. I enjoy that, but guess what? I don't enjoy it when I can't hear. And often the room is so noisy. You're trying to connect with somebody new, and you can't hear a thing. But in this session, you had breakouts, and guess what? The sound was great, and you could connect with the people in your breakout session. And so that's definitely a benefit of the way you did this over the in-person event.
That is, oh, I love that you said that because that's what I love about working online is I've got my own, very own volume button right in front of me because I suffer from exactly that, that if there's chatter going on around me, that you would never get me going down to a coffee house and working because my brain just gets distracted. I need the silence. But I also, my voice goes quite rapidly if I'm in a noisy situation and you're raising your voice. And as you say, those people, they've got great things to share. So I want to hear them. But quite often I've got used to as well at big events, I'll find the outside space, like the balcony on the edge of a hotel or somewhere outside. And even at the weekend, I was actually at a business retreat and there was 20 of us and it got a bit noisy. And I was like, I need to clear my head. So I went to one of the other people there and said, hey, are you up for a walk and talk? Because I'd quite like to, go a bit deeper on this with you. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, brilliant. I was the only one who did that. And one of the people running it was like, yeah, I spotted you out the window. Like, what were you two up to? And I was like, this is how I work. So, what I would like to just encourage listeners is if you find yourself in that space, don't be worried about asking for something different that suits you because I find generally people are like, oh, that's quite a good idea, actually. Yeah, I'll be up for that. And they appreciate the break, no matter what their personality is, as most people like to step away from those busy spaces. But as you say, working online, breakout rooms, it's small. We didn't have breakout rooms bigger than 4 people. So you could all have a chance to talk.
Yeah, I love that this may be different, but this is what works for me, having. And so it was a couple things, right? It was like getting out of the noisy space, but having that deeper connection, with the one person. The other thing is in situations like that, sometimes it's just a matter, you just need a break. And I know that oftentimes introverts feel weird, like, oh, I can't just go take a walk by myself at this event. But yes, you can, figure out, is it a chat I need with a person or two, or is it just some quick time alone? Whatever, figure out what works for you and not necessarily what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, I quite often do take myself out on my own as well. And I'm like, yes, just take some minutes to decompress. And no one ever misses you. I know we all think we're amazing, but actually, at an event like that, no one cares if you step out for 10 minutes and they don't even notice. So even if you feel awkward, no one else even notices. And
Right.
then you come back and they go, oh, wow, you're bouncy and fresh. And I'm like, yes, I've been with no one for the last 15 minutes. It's been fab.
Yeah. So do you think that deep thinkers were drawn to this event?
I think so. Because of the conversations that we then had, and I had some people who weren't planning on attending many sessions, and then they got completely drawn in and hooked because they realized it did energize them. They liked the format. So it definitely grew in momentum as well. And during the week, it was really lovely. The main place where the buzz online was created was in LinkedIn, and there was a lot of posts, and I kept getting more and more signups through the week. And even since then, as well, people going, oh, I really want to attend. It sounded amazing, and I couldn't get there. And I'm like, yes, if in your business you cannot find 1 hour in a 5-day week to join me live, we need to talk because that's how I help my clients create the space in their week. And if you're so busy, it's something you want to do, you've signed up for, but you didn't attend, and it was completely free for listeners at this point to understand that it was free to attend live. And I'm like, there's different ways of working. And for me, growing my business, this is part of the introvert way, is I think we need to make sure we're not filling our week fully. So we are allowing ourselves time to think, to explore new ideas, make new connections, because those connections and collaborations will open up new opportunities for you.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. How did you manage your energy? So I'm thinking, man, Susanna's doing these four sessions Monday through Friday, back to back. She's on the spot. I know you're a fellow introvert. So how did you manage your energy during that?
So there was a couple of things. In advance, I made sure that the weekend before, I literally did nothing. So I was like filling up my battery the weekend before. And then I made sure during the week, I also had my wing woman, who is my online producer. So she was handling all the Zoom rooms, the breakout rooms, the Miro boards. So we'd had a couple of tech rehearsals the couple of weeks prior. So I love theatre work and things. So I'm always into dress rehearsals, tech rehearsals. Let's make sure before, so I wasn't panicking too much in the week. So one was the energy in advance. The second was having that person behind the scenes to support me. And that also included during the sessions, she was asking me, hey, do you want to go in the breakout rooms in this session or not? And if I felt my energy lower, I would say no. If I was feeling a bit higher, or I was like, oh, but I really want to speak to that person in the room, host privileges, I got to choose which breakout room I went into. But she was helping me in those sessions also manage. And the way I ran it is they were 1 hour spot on. We always kept to that. So it was no more than 60 minutes for any session, which meant I had, on the whole, 45, 50 minutes downtime between each session. And I cancelled all client work that week. I just focused fully on it. So I wasn't having to then check email or do anything else. So again, between the sessions, I was just walking out of my office into the garden, fresh air, re-energizing. So I was keeping high. And it did get to a point, and I did share quite a funny photo of me looking quite frazzled online. And I actually took that, it was on the Wednesday evening that I think I got to the sort of peak tiredness, because at the start of the week, I was not sleeping so well because of excitement and adrenaline, like nerves, or like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I don't know why I'm doing this. There was all that in advance. By Wednesday, it's that midday hump. And then I was like, I need to sleep. And I slept for 11 hours. And then I woke up Thursday and went, right, I can do this. And then I was off again. And and for me, it was about having all those mini breaks, but also clearing my schedule. And then the weekend after, absolutely nothing on as well. Purposely, I sort of went, no, I'm not doing family commitments, nothing. I am going to pretty much spend most of the weekend sleeping. And I did. And it was brilliant.
Yeah, I love your plan. That's amazing. And yes, we should prepare and make sure the technology is going to work. And I mean, that's for introverts and extroverts, but I mean, it can be so stressful when you're getting up to give a presentation and the technology fails. But you also had somebody there, you had somebody supporting you, which is so important. We can't do everything ourselves. If we're giving a presentation, we should have someone to do the technology, especially if there's breakout rooms or maybe you're doing a survey or something like that. We absolutely should have somebody so you don't have to worry about everything.
Yeah, and it got to the point that, before I opened, I think it was like 450 signups. So I was like, right, I better up my Zoom like room limits and various things like that, which, it was like $10 to up from 100 to 500. And we never actually got over 100 live. But it's little things like that I'm like, for the sake of $10, I'm going to pay that $10 just to get it
Yeah.
off my like, oh, what if suddenly everyone, because I had no idea which speaker was going to pull in more people, where people would be more available. And yeah, so I had 460 sign up. And then we had the attendees spread throughout the week, basically, in all the different sessions. So I think the maximum we had in one session was about 50.
Okay. And if you need to sleep 11 hours, you had a plan for it. Like that, you're probably not doing that all the time, but it was okay because that's what you needed right then.
Yeah, I warned my family, and my husband had taken over all kid duty that week. He
Okay.
was doing
Okay.
all the dinners. So when I exited, it was like, no, there was literally no other duties going on. And I think if I hadn't have done that and cleared the decks, I would have been a lot more of a wreck. But I did also realize It's because the conversations, they were interesting, they were deep. People were having breakthroughs in the live rooms about where they could go with their business. And that actually really energizes me. So the conversations energized me rather than drained me. So it wasn't as bad as it might sound outwardly. And because we were doing sort of micro segments of 10 minutes this, 10 minutes that. So it's not like I was constantly on the go, even though as an attendee, it felt more constant. But for myself, it was like an up and down during the sessions, even where I could step away.
Yeah, I love that because that's a big myth right there. We don't like some people say introverts. The difference is that we get drained by people and energized by being alone. And I don't like that definition. It's too simplistic for me. We absolutely, I say I can get drained by certain situations, and I'll even say certain people, but some conversations can absolutely energize me. Like this conversation is energizing me. I love talking with you. And I think where we get drained, and this is what we need to understand, what does drain you? What drains me is staying in small talk for too long. That's what drains me. And trying to come up with interesting things to say for too long of a period of time. But you get me talking about something like this that's interesting, I might be energized by it.
Yeah, I am totally as well. And this is where like all the topics, I mean, the things we covered, we went from like collaborative spaces to emotional intelligence and AI to productivity, email, LinkedIn. I mean, honestly, we covered such a broad spectrum of topics in the week. It never felt any form of repetition as well. So it wasn't like I was having the same conversations. And I think this is why there were certain people who came along to multiple sessions because they realized they were taking away these other elements. And when you ask me, what does authority mean to you? What came out of the week as well? And we are actually still creating and developing the Superfast Authority Insights report that will be available in December time. Is that authority is about, I see it visually as a cliff face where you see the stratas of rocks that have developed over time. And I see your authority is like that. There's lots of different layers that you need to build up. There's not one thing that creates your authority. You need to pull different elements together. And that was what we were covering through the week. And it's like, well, where's my touchstone in this space? Where's the touchstone in that space? And then you build the cliff of authority when you've stacked all these things together.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I love your plan that you built. You weren't trying to take clients those afternoons. You had an additional support person with your husband taking care of some other things. And that's what it's all about. We can be absolutely amazing, but what do we need? What do we need for our energy and to recharge and to prepare, all of that. So did you see people that were participating that built relationships from this event?
Very much so. And even since then, because at the start of every session as well, and I've seen a lot of people become a lot more active on LinkedIn. So at the start of every session, I was saying, hey, drop your LinkedIn links in the chat box. So I was positively encouraging people to reach out and connect. And I've since seen even people form those collaborations and do things together and go, yes, this is great. Let's get on a call. And I spoke to someone and it was like, oh, yeah, I met up with this person and the other who I met at the think tank. And we had a great conversation. And that just fills me with joy because good people attract good people. And the more we can all work together and collaborate, everyone will do better in my head. I'm like, I'm not competition. I'm always collaboration over competition.
Yeah, that's great. And another introvert myth, we absolutely want to connect with people, but some ways don't work as well for us or not effective. But, sounds like this was really a good way for introverts to connect. And I found myself in the breakout sessions connecting with these people that I hadn't met before. So, again, we want to connect, but let's create some ways that are better.
Yeah, small rooms. That for me is critical. When you can have that one-on-one deeper conversation, and this is why we kept the rooms to threes and fours, because it gives people a chance to be heard and to speak. And I think it's a lot harder when you're in front of 8 or 10 people to share quite so much, basically. So small rooms definitely benefit me. So yeah, I set it up to suit me at the end of the
Oh,
day.
and I mean, you get more than three or four, and you're not all going to share. You're not all going to share equally. So three to four is a good magic number for that, where everybody is taking a turn and getting to know each other. I thought that was very effective.
Yeah, there was a lot behind it, a lot of forethought, and one of the speakers was a productivity ninja, Haley Watts, and I actually reached out to her, and it was in the summer, and I was like, Haley, my brain is exploding. So she was like, use this app, Todoist, and just put down all the tasks. I brain dumped. Half an hour later, I had 230 tasks in my head to do with the summit that I was just like, zoom. Okay, that's why I was in overwhelm. And it was at that point that I went, I need the online producer. I need support with the email piece as well, scheduling all those things, because there's a lot of moving parts. And it was your point earlier, just to pick up on, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do it. And for me, that was actually a huge learning, is it helped me delegate a lot more in my own business, because I knew I'd hit that wall and there was no way I wanted to end up in burnout, which I think I could have really easily done if I hadn't gone, right, no, I need the support. And I also reached out to people to be promotional partners. So the whole event was free. The promotional partners, the logo was there, but they weren't paying me. I wasn't paying them. It was very much built on collaborations and friendships and relationships that I built over the years. And because they believed in the mission and the value, and they wanted to be part of something new and different, that they went, yeah, I'm here, I'm standing by your side, let's do this. What can we do to help? And that to me just showed how amazing the online business community is.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm thinking about your productivity tip. As introverts, we have so many ideas. That's one of our gifts. But if you have 230, I think that's the number you threw out. You're not going to remember all those. You got to capture them in an app or some online system, or even write them down. And as you have them, it might be really good ideas, really important things to do, but we can't hold them all in our heads, as powerful as our minds are.
Yeah, and one of the good things about putting it into an app and with Todoist is I could then share those boards with my supporters, so they could see, okay, well, this is the piece I can take from you, Susanna. That's what I know to do. Or they might look at something else and go, no, that's you. You need to make that decision. So it was even having the support there of them going, yeah, I can do that bit, but not that bit. And so I wasn't even having to always decide what to delegate and put out. I just like, this is what I want to happen. This is my vision. This is who I want to reach. How can I do it? And I say, as we're recording now, we're still gathering the insight report and pulling together to create a kind of state of the nation of what do expert entrepreneurs really feel about authority and growing their business, which ideas are the most interesting. And this will all start rolling through all my content over the next year. It's very much the start of something. And you start with a bang. That's what I reckon. And then you can sort of live off the after effects for a while.
Yeah. So you dreamed up this event, and now it's all done, and you said you're looking at the insights. Was there something that surprised you that you learned that you weren't expecting?
I think the biggest thing that surprised me from it all was how fast everyone came into my vision. Because when I had this idea, I did think like, oh my God, am I just going out there? I've not seen anyone do this before. Why haven't they? Is there a reason? And then I started talking to some as well, the amazing speakers. So it started with talking to these top industry speakers, and they were like, no, I love the idea. I want to be in a think tank summit with you. And they would turn down regularly requests, like they would get 5, 10 requests every week to be on other style summits. but it was the way I also did do something slightly unusual in how I approached them. It was very personalized. And, it wasn't just a cold email because I'm like, it's that piece about connection and yeah, just speed that people went, wow, no, I want to be part of this. I love this idea. I'm going to help you promote it. And that was just really lovely. I wasn't expecting that. Normally, when I've done things in the past, you just feel it's always just you solo spearheading something. But it was really nice having a whole team of cheerleaders around me going, yep, we're right behind you, Susanna, and we're going for it. And that felt amazing.
Yeah. And even the connection piece, because, I get plenty of emails about the podcast and I get plenty of cold emails, but you really can craft an email where you are making a connection. And those are the people that I'm more likely to connect with versus someone that reaches out that knows nothing about the show. You know, I'm more likely to connect with that person that does make the effort.
One of the talks at the start of the week, which were by a duo called Andrew and Pete, and they run Atomicon, which is the biggest conference in the UK for entrepreneurs, for small business owners. And they talked about when you're looking at growing your authority super fast, they went through into quite a few pieces, but one of my biggest takeaways was the remarkable ask. You can't just be normal if you want to stand out. So how can you do things differently? How can you make it different? Don't just send an email. I was connecting through DMs on different social channels. I was creating unique slide decks for every speaker that I wanted. And I was speaking to speakers who are totally acing it and are keynote speakers on like social media marketing world. But because my timeline was relatively short for them, they were like, not this time, but let me know next time. But it means I've started the conversation. And a lot of people hold themselves back by going, but I can't talk to this person. They put people on pedestals. So, for example, I had Sue B. Zimmerman, who's at the Instagram expert, and she spoke and, keynoted social media marketing world. And she was like, no, I'm just a normal person. I remember when I started, and it wasn't that long ago, but we're all just normal. But it's the way you reach out and show that you respect and trust and love what they're doing. It's not just like a notch, basically, or a checkbox to be ticked off. As you say, when people approach you for the podcast, you want to know why. What are they going to share that's going to be different for your listeners? How is it going to benefit their listeners? You want to feel loved, basically, because when you're hosting something, it's a lot of work. So, and people don't appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but there's a certain message that I have, and it needs to be in line with that. Definitely not against it, because there's definitely people that don't understand introversion, and I don't want to spread any myths on the show and bust them.
Very much so. Yeah. We could talk for a very long time, couldn't we, David?
Yeah, we
What's our
sure
next
could.
topic?
We sure could. What'd you hear from participants?
As in their feedback or what they were sharing?
Yeah, what did they tell you about the event?
So there was a lot of that. They absolutely really enjoy the interactive whiteboard on top of the breakout rooms. They felt that was really good in terms of the logistics. But also, they just loved the connection, the collaboration. There were certain talks. I must admit, all the talks, when I asked for the feedback from participants after, they all scored like 9 out of 10 or more because it varied. But what was really interesting is I asked two different questions on exit. And one was about how thought-provoking did you find this session? And the other was how implementable did you find these ideas? And the top three were completely different in those two areas. And that made me very happy because I wanted to hit those different levels. And I found the conversations which scored the highest for being the most thought-provoking were things like talking about AI in relation to emotional intelligence. And we might have had a smaller live room. I think we had maybe 15, 16 people in those, but the discussions were really deep and very thought-provoking in terms of how people thought, okay, so what are we going to do with this? Because quite often AI is just all about the tactics and like, oh, what can I do for my prompts and all the rest of it? But instead, we went deep and we were like, but what do you want from this? How do you want the future to be? Because we are ultimately in control of it. And that opened up some really interesting conversations as well. So the participants were just all amazing. I loved every single person who turned up, and they definitely reflected that back. There was always thank yous sprinkled everywhere at the end. So that kept me happy, obviously, because I'm like, they could have left at any time. The other thing
Right.
with online, they could have just rocked up for 5 minutes and then disappeared. But most people, when they joined for the full session. We had very little dropout during the hour. So that was just another data signal to me that we'd got the mix right.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on a great event. Is there anything else you want to add today?
I think my main thing for your listeners is if you've got a new or different idea, step up and do it. Like, have the courage to ask for support, and do find some people you trust to have a sounding board, a bit of a sense check. And that was like at the start for me. I was in a small room with just a few people and I went, I've got this idea. Is it crazy? And if they went yes, I was like, okay, I think I'm doing this. And so if you're listening and you've got that, it's the courage that moves mountains and changes the world. So don't think I've got to do something the normal way. Think about how you can pattern disrupt. How can you change what's happening around you, particularly if it's not suited to you and your personality? Instead, create the space you want to see. And that is what I did, and I loved it. And there might well be another one in a slightly different format. I've got no fixed dates as yet because I'm still tumbling out at the end of the live one, but obviously everyone involved in the first is now in my newsletter, in my subscriber list. So if this sounds interesting to you, I would just say, follow me, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. If you do send me a note as well and say, hey, I heard you chatting to David. Like, let me know where you've heard us, and that would be really cool. But yeah, just do something different, I think would be my main takeaway.
I love that. And, just in the introvert extrovert context, so much is geared towards extroverts. Let's figure out a way that we can be effective for everyone. And thanks again. I'll be sure to put your LinkedIn in the show notes so people can find you. But this has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you about this.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to further connecting with you. Reach out at david@quietandstrong.com or check out the quietandstrong.com website, which includes blog posts and links to social media channels. Send me topics or guests you would like to see on the show. If you're interested in getting to know yourself better, there's now a free Type Finder personality assessment on the Quiet and Strong website. This free assessment will give you a brief report, including the 4-letter Myers-Briggs code, and you can also have the option of purchasing the full report if you'd like to learn more. I'll add a link to the show notes. So many great things about being an introvert, and we need those to be understood. Get to know your introverted strengths and needs and be strong.